So in a previous life, when I spent about 20 years in the nation's capital with a business group, one of the things that we started doing was in January, beginning the year, by bringing in a number of experts from different sectors of the economy to talk about the year ahead, the business outlook, the economic outlook. And here in Round Rock, we've got such a dynamic, diverse business community, both in terms of our own community, plus interacting throughout Williamson County and the greater Austin area, that we decided to start out 2012 with a program just like that. We're fortunate to have some terrific speakers today, and I'd like to introduce the chair-elect of the Round Rock Chamber, John Garrett, Community Impact, who's going to moderate our program. How about a big round of applause for Mr. John Garrett?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Garrett. I'm publisher of Community Impact newspaper, and I'm not only the publisher, but I'm also the owner. So, like many of you, over the last few years, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the economy, and just trying to grow a business as we've had a lot of difficulties, but also a lot of good things. We have 8 papers in Austin now. We've got 3 in the Houston area and 1 up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And what I can tell you is something you've probably heard before in other speeches or other talks about the economy, about how lucky we are to be the region that we're in, number one, because we are very lucky, and you're going to see more about that, hear more about that today. But the other thing that we've got going for us is, that I've seen in other parts of the state that aren't as good as Round Rock in particular, is the partnership between the city and the chamber, economic development-wise, and what the voters passed this last November even makes that partnership stronger. And you'll see, I think in the years to come, what big impact that will have in trying to make this place a really even better place to live in. And even though we've had some difficult times, we've seen some toughness. I like to say that people in this region, our attitude is we're always optimistic. You know, even if there's just a couple of drops in the glass is half full. You know, in fact, after the rain today, the lake is full. That's what it's true. But you know what? We also have seen some difficulty. I'm sure many of you have seen, like I have, friends and family and neighbors lose jobs, lose their businesses, and it really comes down to like, what we wanted to accomplish today is what could we give you as you approach the new year that would maybe give you some more information. We don't have any fortune tellers that I know of on this great group of folks, but this panel, but we do have some very intelligent people, and they have some kind of unique perspectives on not only from we've got not only a very smart academic person from Texas A&M showing a lot from an academic standpoint, but also from a numbers standpoint. But we also have some folks from some key areas, including real estate, and I think another important driver at the local level, the restaurant group. So I want to start by, let's just get going. We've got Texas State in Round Rock. Let's get Dr. Chittenden, if he'd mind coming down. I want to introduce him. He's the chair, Department of Finance and Economics for Texas State University, and also the McCoy College of Business Administration there at Texas State. He has got like tons of credentials. He's been named in numerous publications, both regionally and across the country. He's a certified treasury professional, tons of experience, and he's got some, I've seen a sneak peek of his presentation. We're all going to get ready. You're about to get really smart. So just soak it in. Thank you, Dr. Chittenden.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Just real quick to dispel a myth, there's an old joke on how can you tell if an economist is an introvert or an extrovert. The extrovert will look at your shoes when he talks to you. Like I said, we'll try to dispel that myth. So the first thing I want to do is start with a quote. Let's see if this slide's here. Here we go. So from Time Magazine said they could plainly see for the first time that the U.S. was blessed with a new kind of economy, different from any ever seen on the face of the earth. In the new economy, many of the old classical rules of economics no longer apply. Over the years, the U.S. has made and learned new rules all its own. The test and the proof that the U.S. had learned its lessons well was the recession. It not only highlighted the changes in the economy, but proved beyond doubt that the U.S. could take a hard knock and come bouncing back. Now the question is, when was this written? Over 50 years ago, We said the old rules don't apply. It's different this time. You hear this today. The old rules don't apply. Well, let me tell you, the basic rules of economics still apply. They applied 100 years ago, they applied 50 years ago, and they apply today. And so, although the details will change, the basics are always the same. Now, at least from a technical perspective, we're not in a recession. A recession is basically when the economy is contracting, when things are actually getting smaller in terms of economic output. And our most recent recession officially ended June of 2009. And so here we are, almost 18 months later, and things still aren't going gangbusters. But at least things are growing, as we're going to see in a moment. So how do we measure this? Well, we measure it with what we call GDP, gross domestic product. And GDP is basically the value of all the goods and services that we produce here in the United States. Where does that come from? Well, about 70% or so is driven by consumers. They make up the largest portion of the spending in our economy. Businesses right now make up about 13%, and government makes up about 20%. Since we import more than we export, that's actually a small drain, and that drains off about 4% of our economic output. So overall, where we've been is in the third quarter of last year, economic growth was at 1.8% on an annual basis. On Friday, they'll release the preliminary figures for the fourth quarter, and the preliminary estimates of what that's going to be is about 3.1%. And so we're starting to see some growth. And if we look at what's happened over the last three quarters, first quarter 2011 we were up a little under 0.5%, then almost 1.5% in the second quarter, 1.8% in the third quarter, and we see, like I said, preliminary estimates of about 3.1% for the fourth quarter. So things are starting to get better. What's driving that? Consumer spending is starting to increase. Business investment is starting to increase. Exports are starting to go up. Unfortunately, our desire for imports is also increasing. So again, that's a bit of a drain on our economy. And state and local government spending is down. We've seen, particularly in the Austin area, the impact of that with cuts in the state budget and lots of state workers being let go. It's good from a budget perspective, not so good from an economy perspective when those folks are out of work. So let's focus, we've got just a few minutes, we're going to focus on what's happening with consumers right now. The unemployment rate is starting to finally come down. It was stubbornly around 10% for a while. Nationwide, it's now at 8.5%. Just released December's figures, fell to 8.5%. Texas at 7.8%. If we were to also have on here Austin, the nice thing is actually they include Austin, Round Rock, San Marcos, that line would be a little bit below the Texas line. And so Central Texas is doing better than the rest of the state, which is doing better than the rest of the country. In fact, Texas for the last 60 months has had a lower unemployment rate than the rest of the country. So things are starting to turn around in terms of the consumer and being able to work. What this graph shows is the red lines are payrolls, basically the number of jobs that are out there. So before the recession, we were at about 138 million jobs in the United States. Now we're at about 132 million jobs. So we're about 6 million jobs lower than where we were just a few years ago. Also, the blue line is showing the number of people that are participating that are what we consider part of the workforce. Those that are 16 or older are considered part of the workforce, the labor force. And about 3% of those, going from 67 to 64%, have simply given up. They're no longer looking for a job, and if you're not looking for a job, you're not considered unemployed anymore, even though perhaps last year you were. So we've seen a decline there, and we're starting to see job growth. You can see we came way down, we're slowly going up, but we've got a long way to go. Last year in the U.S., we created approximately 1.6 million jobs. 200,000 of those were right here in Texas. 1 out of every 8 new jobs last year was created in Texas. The problem is, and this is in December of last year, in the U.S. we created about 200,000 jobs. But if we've got 6 million jobs to get back to where we were, that's another 30 months, 2.5 years before we even get to the employment levels that we saw before the recession. So things are slowly getting better, but we've got a long way to go before we get back to where we were. One of the things that drives spending for consumers is the value of their home. If we go back just real quick history lesson, go through the 90s, what drove all of our consumption in the 90s? The stock market. Then the early part of this millennium, I guess you would say, the stock market crashed, and then what happened? At least throughout the country, real estate fueled that spending. And then with the real estate crash, all of a sudden our ATM machine was gone. We couldn't pull all that money out. The nice part in Texas is with, some of the bankers can see the good and the bad in this, we had some of the strictest home equity laws in the country here in Texas, which prevented people from over-leveraging. So we didn't experience nearly the boom, but we haven't experienced nearly the bust in Texas either. So nationwide, you can see median prices for homes topped out at about $262,000. Recently, we're at about $214,000, and now we've been bouncing around for the last couple of years in this band of about $214,000 to $240,000. So we're not back to where we were, but we've stabilized. And so that's the first step to recovery, is stabilization. Foreclosure rates are improving, and in Texas, we're much better than most of the rest of the country. Nationwide, 1 out of every about 600 mortgages in December of last year went into foreclosure. You can see in Texas, we are half that, with 1 out of every 1,133 mortgages went into foreclosure in just that 1 month. Nevada is about the worst state out there right now. 1 out of every 177 mortgages in just the 1 month went bad. So finally, consumer confidence in terms of where consumers are. The economy in many ways is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you feel good about the economy, what are you going to do?
Spend.
You're going to go out and spend. If you feel bad about the economy, what are you going to do? You're not going to spend. So if you feel good, you go out and spend. That spending does what to the economy? Makes it good. If you're cautious, if you're worried, and you're saving because you're not sure what the economy is going to do, you're contributing to that problem. So I would encourage all of you, when you're done here, go up the road to the outlet mall and help spur the economy. So how are consumers feeling? Well, we're not feeling nearly as confident as we were before the stock market crash. However, you can see post-recession, we're starting to recover. So right now, this index is at about 70. We've gone down as low as 55. In Texas, this same index is at 93.7. And it was just 50 just a couple of months ago. So in Texas, consumer confidence has really increased. And so we're seeing this really go further. So in summation for consumers real quick, unemployment's still high, 8.5% is just still way too high. Job growth is small and uneven. We haven't seen lots of strong, consistent growth yet. Although we didn't have slides on it, personal income is rising and consumer credit is starting to rebound. For a long time, consumers were paying off their debts, which again, individually is good, but collectively for the economy is not great. Because if you're paying off your credit card, you're not out at restaurants spending money, or you're not buying a home. Foreclosures are high, but they're still falling, and prices are starting to stabilize. And as we just said, consumer confidence is improving. So just a couple more things I want to show you. Some have worried about, are we going to have a double-dip recession? And you don't have to be an economist, you don't have to have lots of data to figure out whether or not we're going to have a recession. There's one thing that you can look at, and all you have to look at is what the 10-year Treasury rate is. And you can go on Google and look that up, look at the Wall Street Journal, look at the paper, versus what the 3-month Treasury security is. And so we hit that. Notice those gray bars represent the recessions. Right before the recessions, that difference goes negative. So when the short-term 3-month rate goes above the 10-year rate, that's when we've got a recession coming pretty quick. And we're not anywhere close to that right now. And so my perception is I don't make lots of predictions, but I don't think we have anything to worry about in the next 12 to 24 months in terms of a nationwide recession. What we do have to worry about is the national debt. It took us 200 years in this country to accumulate approximately our first $1 trillion in debt. And so it took us from George Washington to Jimmy Carter to have about $934 billion in debt. During Reagan's 2 terms, that tripled to about 2.7. You go ahead and hit those. 2.7 trillion. So Ronald Reagan tripled the national debt. Bush the first, we added about another $1.5 trillion in debt. During Clinton's term, we added another $1.5 trillion in debt. So now we're at about 5.7. During Bush the second, it nearly doubled to $10.5 trillion. And now today, we've increased it approximately another 50% to $15 trillion. The per capita debt in Greece, and if you've been listening to the news today, Greece is back in the news, potential default on their debt, $44,000 per person. In the United States, we're a little over $45,000 per person. Now the difference is we do have a higher national income. So that $45,000 is a little bit less than it would be for the average Greek person, if you would. However, my wife and I have 4 children. So that's 6 of us. That means our portion is $270,000 of the national debt. I'll tell you, I do not have an extra $270,000 to send to the government. My guess is most of you don't, and even if you did, you don't want to send that check in. But somebody's going to have to pay those bills. Just to give you real quick, where politicians don't get it because they don't understand, and unfortunately, most of us don't understand. Back in April, Congress was deadlocked on the budget. And the first number there, $3.6 trillion. That's an awful lot of zeros. $3.6 trillion is the outlays for last year. So 2011, government spent about $3.6 trillion. Then in April, Congress was patting themselves on the back because they cut $38 billion out of the budget. And the whole thing almost got tripped up because of $300 million for Planned Parenthood. Now, it doesn't matter which way you are in terms of your political views on Planned Parenthood, put it in perspective. Cut out all those extra zeros, and it's like saying we had a $36,000 budget. We're proud because we were able to cut $380 of it, wow. And we risked shutting down the government over the last $3. Put it in perspective. So what's the outlook? Last couple of things here real quick. The blue line here is the leading economic index. It shows historically where the economy is going. So the economy typically follows this. The red line is basically where the economy is right now. Good news is that blue line is going way up and the red line is slowly going up. And for the last one here, what's happening in Austin, Round Rock, San Marcos? The business cycle index, you can see things have gone down, things have gone up. Good news is things are on their way back up. And so, again, I don't have a crystal ball. Oftentimes as a professor I'm asked, where should I be putting my money right now? What's the next hot stock? And although I love my job, if I knew that answer, do you really think I would be here right now? I would have taken advantage of that information. It's after 12, I'd have an adult beverage, I'd be on a beach somewhere. But I am cautiously optimistic for the national economy. I'm extremely optimistic for the Central Texas economy. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Robert.
Question for you.
A lot of people have said that Texas kind of weathered the storm for a lot of different reasons, and as we enter 2012, if there are signs of a national recovery, is there anything in the Texas economy that we need to be paying attention to, or anything with government spending cuts that it might actually hurt us as we move forward in 2012? Anything we should look at?
Well, the state cuts definitely have a tempering effect on our economy. Like I said, it's in the long term, it's a good thing. Short term, it's painful for us to absorb those job losses, and that's less money that's going into the economy. In Texas, we've got a much more diversified economy than we did back, say, in the 1980s. But one of the things that still drives it, a large portion of it, are energy prices. And so we're starting to see energy prices start to creep up. Nationwide, that's not great for people. Overall, it's still a good thing for Texas, though.
All right, give another hand for Dr. Chittenden, and hopefully we'll have... Is there any question why Texas State's doing such a good job educating the next workforce? That's a great start. Secondly, the next person that I'm going to call up, if I could get the bio ready, is I'm going to ask Richie Jackson. He's the the Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Restaurant Association. He's won numerous awards, Lifetime Time Achievement Awards. He's been leader of several groups. Currently, he oversees all the operations of the Texas Restaurant Association as its chief executive, and he's also an advocate for the industry and an active participant in the state politics.
Thank you very much. You know, I guess I'd have to certainly compliment your pretty dead-on analysis of where we are in the Austin, Round Rock, San Antonio, really all the way from Temple to San Antonio corridor. You know, we've seen this area outperform, you know, the state as a whole, and there are some exceptions, Midland, Odessa, some very heavy oil-based economies that have done a little better, but you're blessed to be in an area that has seen a lot more economic activity and opportunity than some other parts of the state. You know, if you look at the state as a whole, I would have to say that performance in 2011 was pretty slow. Performance in 2010 was the year we like to forget about, 2009 and 2010. We started to see a little recovery in 2011 with a growth rate of a little less than 4% in our industry. And for 2012, we anticipate overall a growth rate of a little more than 4%. So we are headed in the right direction, and we're getting there a little faster here than we are in some other parts of the state. I will tell you though, our operators still list the economy as their #1 concern. There is no question that filling those restaurant seats is top of mind with all of my members. And I know when you look at Friday and Saturday night, it looks pretty good. There's a wait, you know, the business seems, the parking lot seems full, business seems to be good. But when you come back on Tuesday or Wednesday, you know, that's where the profits are made. And you really need to be filling those seats, you know, 6 days a week or 7 days a week instead of the 2 or 3 days a week that constitute the weekend. So we still have a ways to go as in terms of our industry and opportunities. It is driven very much by that consumer confidence. And over the last several years, we've seen a decline in consumer confidence. We've seen in 2008, 2009, 2010, an unprecedented 3-year period where the real consumer disposable income declined, where they had less money to spend, not only in their earnings, but also in their real estate and their stock portfolio, and that has had an impact on consumer confidence. And the things we worry about today are gasoline prices and how it impacts consumer confidence as well. As you see, you know, that increased production in the oil patches, you see increased economic activity in oil. You also realize that is also associated with increased cost of oil products, and gasoline is one of those drivers. And it's certainly one of those things that competes with us for that disposable income. The good news that we have within the industry is there is a high level of pent-up demand. Right now, if you interview or as we survey the general public, we find that about 40% of those that we survey say that they are not eating out as much as they would like to. The better news for that is 33% of those are men and 46% are women. And we all know who wins that argument when it comes to eating out. So we do think that there is some opportunities for us as we look forward. I will also tell you in this, the opportunity that I see our members taking most advantage of now is the opportunity to come in and acquire real estate, come in and do deals and build new restaurants and looking for the future at prices that they haven't been able to get to in a long, long time. So I think you are seeing people who are taking advantage of the real estate opportunities that exist. They are coming in largely through internal cash flow financing because access to capital is still somewhat constrained and somewhat limited. But we are seeing some growth in new outlets in people are taking advantage of the real estate opportunities that exist. The things that keep them up at night, food costs, first and foremost. Last year we saw about an 8% increase in food costs. And while we think that will moderate some this year, it's still going to be one of those factors that continues to escalate and continues to cause concern. The biggest reason for that, in our opinion, is largely due to our national policy on food for fuel. Ethanol is a huge driver in food cost inflation, and as we continue to convert more and more of our corn stock into ethanol. Now, when you stop and think about that for a minute, you say, well, gee, how big a deal can that be? How many ears of corn do I eat in a year? Not that much. But the fact of the matter is, 96% of our Texas corn crop goes to feed livestock, either cattle, poultry, or pork. 96% of that, and for the first time ever in 2011, over 50% of our corn supply went ethanol rather than into creating our agricultural products that we consume on a regular basis. So that's a concern that we continue to have, and it is an issue I'm sure that is going to be debated as a farm bill works its way through Congress in 2012. I think the other uncertainty that we have is looking forward to 2014 is healthcare and what that means for our industry. We are the most labor-intensive industry in the country. We have the lowest productivity when measured as sales per employee in the country. And the typical restaurant has about $78,000 to $80,000 worth of income for every full-time employee that they employ. Compare that to a grocery store, and that number is about $270,000. A car dealership, it's up to about $750,000. For manufacturing, it's generally well over $1 million to $2 million per employee. So we don't have much margin in terms of total sales, and even less margin in terms of profits when it comes to adding cost to our labor supply. So that's a real uncertainty that we're concerned with. It's something that we hope that the Congress will address and look at between fuel cost and labor cost. Those are the things that drive food and drive our bottom line profits. So we're looking for some relief and hope that by the time we get to 2014, we will have a better economic outlook than we have today, and also a better political climate. That's about all I've got.
One quick question for you. During the last few years, I know you represent both large and small chains and mom and pops of the latter. Here locally, we've seen some increase in regional, even some national chains that have come to Round Rock. Have you seen over the last few years any kind of shift in success at how the maybe larger chains are handling some of these bigger issues? Are smaller mom and pops under more pressure with some of this?
Well, the economic model for expansion is certainly going to favor the chain because they have the opportunity to expand through a franchise model where they have greater access to capital. But eating out is a unit by unit experience, and there are just not the economies of scale in a large chain that would make a huge difference like some other retail businesses. Everything's done, in the four walls of that restaurant. And an independent restaurant can be very nimble, very quick, be able to seize on trends like going local and sustainability, and it's much, much more difficult for a large chain to adapt to those trends. So I think there's still room for both sides of the spectrum in our industry.
Appreciate that. All right, let's bring up Marge. Marge Phillips is the Chief Executive for the Williamson County Association of Realtors. She is actually been with the association since 2006. She's a risk taker. She's owned 5 businesses of her own, and she also helped lead the association to the new facility during some of these difficult times and made some difficult and tough choices then. So we're looking forward to hearing her perspective on the residential real estate market.
Thank you. And it's good to be here. I certainly listened when I heard you say that it's taken a whole lot of optimism during the last 3 or 4 years. Well, I don't think there's any one place that's needed to do that more than in our association. Because I think if there's any place that's taken the hit, we've taken the hit when it comes to the real estate. Now, there are those of you out there who will say, well, you took it down. So I think that's all part of it, because I think there were a lot of things that contributed to the fall off in real estate. Just as we're going to see, there's a whole lot of things contributing to the upswing in bringing real estate back. Because I think what you've heard already is that there's a lot of different factors and things going on here at play. If we could just say there's one thing that is going to change tomorrow to make it that our members of the association can get up and each sell 2 houses, we'd be doing it. But that isn't the case. That isn't what's going to happen, because as it is with all things, it's going to take a while for things to come back. And I think, you know, we were all part of the 2006. When I came to the association, I came in the boom. And of course, it was in that boom that we decided, gosh, it would be a great idea if we need a new building, to build a new building. So it was a little bit of, to feed off of what you said, yes, in 2006 and 2007, and then in 2008, we decided this would be a great time to build a new building. And we did. And we took that opportunity to stay positive and stay optimistic, because I think that's where we need to be. Because I think if you ask any of our long-term members in the real estate business, they will tell you that real estate does this, that there is an up and down curve to it. Now, maybe it doesn't always stay down as long, but I think they are very used to the ebbs and flows of it. Now, this has been a little bit different because we've seen a whole lot of factors taking place here. But I think we've continued to see their optimism, and their optimism in it, and thinking that it's going to come back. We're going to put people back to work. We're going to continue to put people in new homes. We're going to help them find a new place to live, and things are going to happen. And I think that optimism went along really well in 2009, and then as you heard some of our other presenters say, in 2010, things were a little bit different. We had a lot of our members saying, okay, this is the year, and everything chugged along, and things were kind of okay. And then we got to the beginning of 2011. We had kind of a not real market when we had the $8,000 credit for first-time home buyers, kind of artificially inflated our market to some extent in there, and kind of gave a little bit of a false sense that things were getting better. I think we saw that in a lot of industries, though. That wasn't just in real estate, but I think that happened. And when we found out that went away, a lot of other things were changing in the climate, and all of a sudden, oh no. And I think for a period of time during last year, there was just a lot of, it was difficult. We need to stay positive. Things are going to change. And then I think, as you also heard, there have been things changing. There have been little pieces of things here and there that have taken place. And then I think all of a sudden, in the midst of the low of summer, when everyone thought this is our peak season and it hasn't been, we moved into fall, all of a sudden people started looking for houses. People got worried. What if interest rates go up? And now we need to maybe buy a house. Whoa, interest rates have never been lower. I maybe need to do something. And all of a sudden, at the end of last year, when they least suspected it, in December, we had one of the best months ever. One of the best months in real estate that's happened in the past 3 or 4 years. And I think what we can all be really excited about is that it's continuing over into this year. And it's not artificially being fed by the government. It's real. It's real people going out and looking for homes. Now we have a different problem. Real estate is local. And at our association, we hold property tour. Of course, I'm going to just talk about Round Rock right now, even though that the Williamson County Association covers a lot bigger territory than that. In Round Rock, we give a number of how many homes do we have listed. Last week, that number was 510, correct, Rod? Somewhere in that neighborhood. Just to give you a little perspective on that number, we used to have that many homes for sale just on one side of I-35. Now, that's all the homes that are for sale in Round Rock. That's a different problem. Now we have a problem of lots and lots of buyers, not a lot of homes for sale. So it's kind of like things have to play catch up in here. So what we're seeing is that even though there were only 500 and some houses for sale, we've got almost 100 pending sales. I think many of you could attest to the fact that you've seen houses come on the market and they're gone just like that. So what we're seeing is that our members are extremely busy. There are buyers, buyers, buyers. There are not a lot of resales, however. You're going to hear from the gentleman after me about what they're buying, mostly, who's here from the home builders area, that a lot of them have moved to new homes in there because we don't see a lot of resales. So why don't we see a lot of people with resales? You've also heard comments about that, confidence. There's still that edge of people who don't really feel that now's the time to sell. They're still somewhat worried about their job. They're still somewhat worried about where they live and moving somewhere different, worried about all of those things. But we're beginning to see, and I think this is where we all need to really jump on that positive bandwagon and say, yes, this is the year, you know, because I think we're beginning to see that confidence come back, but it's kind of like, wake up, 3.2% interest? When did that ever happen before? Not in my home buying lifetime, and I've been having that for quite a few years in there, so that's certainly not been in mine. We had a 6.7% interest rate when we bought our first house some 40 years ago. This is wonderful. So I think we're beginning to see our members put that message out there. We're beginning to see investors come back to the market. We're beginning to see a lot of cash buyers, and we're beginning to see a whole lot of activity taking place. But one of the other things that's initially happening is we need to see the home values increasing. Because until we see some increase in home values, we still have a lot of homeowners, as they call, underwater. That means the ever so knowledgeable appraiser is going to come in and tell them what their house is worth, and it's not going to be worth much more than, for some of them, their loan. Because many of these people bought in 07 and 08, when we know what was happening then. Even though we didn't experience a huge increase in property values during that time, which is what saved us a lot from suffering the real depression that other parts of Arizona and Florida and those places had in home values, we stayed pretty flat. In fact, I went to our stats and pulled them up for 2006 and 2007. And the average home price at that time, sale price average was $190. Average sale price today, $185. So we can see that there isn't that much difference in there today. However, the amount of homes sold in the month of December this year was 465. The amount of homes sold back then was 980. That's a huge difference. Not that we're looking to go back to those days back there, because we know there were a lot of things wrong with that. But we're going to try to find that happy ground in between. And I think we're going to try to find that place where things really start to stabilize. Where we see, I think, our home values are inching up. The appraisers are going to catch up with that. And we've got a lot of people who last year or whatever just refied because it was 3.1, 3.5. They're not about to put their house on the market right now strictly because of the fact that I just refinanced it. So they're not ready to absorb those costs in there. So I think that's a lot of what we're seeing in terms of houses being listed. But I'm here to tell you, if you have a house that's in really good shape and you can sell it for what the market will pay, it'll probably be gone next week because we have that kind of a buyer's market. I think you heard that word pent up. We heard that word for a long time at all the real estate conventions. There's pent-up buyers, there's pent-up buyers. We're like, okay, well, when are they coming? Because we're ready, we've got pent-up inventory. Pent-up inventory is leaving. The buyers are starting to come around. Prices, houses that are priced right. Four houses down from me 2 months ago, sold in one day. It went on that morning, it was sold that night. Immaculate condition. That's what's selling. That's what's going to continue to move, priced right. And all of those things are going to help that market value creep up. And the more that market value creeps up, but the question is it going to creep up fast enough to meet the demand? And I think that's great. Okay.
Thanks for your enthusiasm. I'm going to go ahead and, for interest of time, I'm going to ask Scott to go ahead and come up. Scott Norman, he's the Executive Director for the Texas Association of Builders. He not only represents the builders, but he also represents remodelers from across the state. Former Capitol staffer, he's got his law degree from South Texas. It's all you, Scott. Thank you.
Well, I appreciated Marge's reference that everybody's buying new homes, and there is some of that, although what I'm hearing from my builders across the state, I don't know if there's as many as we'd like. I was interviewed by a reporter a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the continuing state of the residential single family. We're primarily single family. We do have some members that do multifamily, but mainly single family building, development, and remodeling is our membership. And I described it as Texas, we are the least sick of all the patients. If you look at the national economy, especially when in the housing economy, there's a lot of good news in Texas, but you have to put it in perspective. Texas, last year, for the 4th year in a row, led the nation in single-family housing starts. We'd only done that one other time prior to 2008, back in the 80s oil boom. And we are more than double the next closest state, which is Florida, in single-family starts. Last year, we had about 66,000 new single-family homes built in Texas. Florida was the next closest at 30,000, and then California was way behind that at 23,000. So that is a very, very good thing, but you have to put it in perspective. From the national high in 2006, 2007 in housing starts, our builders in Texas are down over 2/3 in the number of houses they're building every year, and so that really hurts, and so everything has been adjusted. Their companies have downsized. We've seen a lot of mergers. We've seen a lot of new entrants, or a lot of folks that came into the business are now not in the business anymore, and that is not just builders and developers and remodelers, but it's all the suppliers, mortgage bankers, vendors, you name it, that are in the industry. And so we've seen that happen all across the state, but there's a lot of good news. But one of the things that's very interesting, a statistic I heard fairly recently, last year, for the first time ever, the number of remodeling permits this is a national figure, exceeded the number of single-family starts, and that's never happened again or before in NHB's history. And so that says a lot to what Marge was saying about people are staying in their homes. Construction prices are down, both materials and labor, because the demand is lower, and people are putting that money into their own homes. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I think, as the professor said, consumer confidence. You know, if it takes consumer confidence to get you to go to the outlet mall and spend some money, it takes a whole lot more consumer confidence to go buy what is almost everyone's largest purchase, and that's a new or used home. As consumer confidence continues to increase, we should see an increase in Texas, and certainly being here in the central Texas area, I'll say the Round Rock, Austin, San Marcos, MSA is a top market. It's the 5th market in the United States. Texas is blessed. We have 3 out of the top 5 single-family markets in the country are in Texas. I believe we have something like 6 or 7 out of the top 15. Houston market is number 1, Dallas is number 2, and as I said, the Round Rock, Austin, MSA is number 3. As the opportunities here are great, you know, population growth, a lot of people talk about it. Texas, from the mid-2000s on, was averaging, according to the state demographer, over 1,000 people a day. I think that peaked out at almost 2,000 a day. We're moving to Texas a year or so ago. That's dropped off a little bit, but all of these people moving here have to have a bed to sleep at night and a roof over their heads, we hope. I think that is part of the reason you're seeing the lack of resales, but the additional increase in new home purchases. And a lot of these folks that are moving to Central Texas and the other large communities around the state, we see them moving into multifamily properties. Rents are at all-time highs. Occupancy rates are up there, you know, they're 95, 98% in most markets. We've seen a boom in multifamily permits around the state to try to meet that need. You also have a whole bunch of folks that are cohabitating with friends, family, boomerang people staying or moving back in with their parents. At some point, this pent-up demand is going to pop, and that is a great thing. It's a great thing for our industry, and we're poised in Texas to be in the middle of that, and certainly all of you in the Central Texas area. The population growth is going to grow. I think, you know, our state legislature and leaders have done a good job. Y'all represented. Larry Gonzalez is here, does a great job for Williamson County and the capital. And they have done a great job over the last, 10, 15, 20 years of maintaining Texas' competitiveness when it comes to job growth and creation through the low tax climate that we find ourselves. But there's a bunch of challenges out there as well. Friends at Texas Capital and other bankers that are in the room, I know are doing their best, but obtaining financing both for construction loans, acquisition development, construction loans, and mortgages is very difficult. We do find ourselves in a new world as far as lending goes. It is more difficult, especially at the lower price points of homes, for people to qualify for mortgages. Even with average to good credit, it's very, very difficult, and that is affecting our sales tremendously. The number of closings that fall through are way up there. There's a lot of people out there kicking the tires, looking at homes, wanting to buy, but whether they can't sell their existing house or they're unable to qualify, it's a severe limiter. There's other challenges that we face out there on the state level, and especially in Central Texas, that we're going to have to address. Transportation funding. That is one of the key drivers, and no pun intended, but limiters of the ability of our state to grow. It's the ability to move people and goods around this state. Any of you that have to deal with I-35 or the other roads around here, I'm not telling you anything we don't know, but the state of Texas is going to have to address highway funding. They have not raised the gas tax. The state moving forward is only going to be able to maintain the roads we have, and have said it's going to be very difficult to next to impossible to build new highways moving forward. And so policymakers are going to have to make some tough decisions, because without increasing and improving our transportation infrastructure, we're not going to be able to grow. Water is another major issue. It's one of the top issues our association is trying to address in this next legislative session and moving forward, because our members tell us that houses don't sell very well, toilets don't flush, and there's no water that comes out of the faucet. And so we're going to have to address that. And the state has developed a 50-year water plan, but they have not funded that plan. And the passage of Prop 2 last November was a good start. It increased the bonding authority to allow projects to be built, I think about $6 billion, but I think that plan, the total cost is like $53 billion. And local communities, Central Texas is mentioned many of them, and y'all know this because of the drought, we're going to have to address that. And it's another challenge moving forward. On the immediate horizon, we're seeing, and we're starting to see, especially at some price points, a severe lot shortages out there. And as consumer confidence continues to improve, and hopefully unemployment continues to go down, this demand for housing, this pent-up demand, is only going to go up. But as new houses are getting put on the ground, and last year it was about a little over 6,000, I think 6,100 in this area we built new homes. New lot development has not kept pace. And in fact, it's fallen way behind. And there's obviously a longer lead time on that, on developing the financing, going through the tremendous amount of environmental and local and state government review of development projects to move them forward. And so because of the lack of financing, the difficulty in our developers to put these lots on the ground, when this turns, and we're already seeing some signs of this, going to be a severe lot shortage out there, and that's going to drive up the cost of those lots. It's going to drive up, they're out there, it's going to drive up the cost of homes, and then obviously as this cycle goes, then we'll probably see an overbuilding a lot as the banks loosen up the funds. But that is out there on the horizon. On the local level, economists predict that 2012 is going to be perhaps a little bit better, 5 to 10% better than 2011, over that 6,000 and change houses. We have been seeing just a modest increase year to year, absent the spike in 2010 because of the new home buyer housing tax credit. But as I said, things are good. We're glad to be in Texas. Our members are, it sounds hokey, but they do like providing the American dream to people. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.